And I would say, like, if if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, well, I've heard Fan Finders, I've heard Greenlight Warmth, I've heard Opt-in before. It's like, this is a really good opportunity, if you are familiar with this stuff, to listen and make sure that you have in place what we're talking about and that you're kind of hitting the key characteristics of these campaigns to make sure that you're running things efficiently.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast, brought to you by Indiepreneur.io.
What's up, Indies? Welcome back to the Creative Juice podcast. I am your co-host, Jack McCarthy, and with me is my co-host, Mr. Ed Isola. Ed, what's happening, dude?
I am having a great day, and I'm super excited to jump into everything we're about to cover.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a really fun episode, especially just to give you guys a little bit of an insight. Ed and I just had a meeting with the whole IndieX team a couple hours ago. We have our meetings, our whole team meeting on the same day that we record the podcast. And some of the stuff that we're going to talk about in this episode, we actually sort of touched on in that meeting. Accidentally, Jesse had brought up a couple points that I was like, oh, this is a head scratcher. Going to bring this to the Creative Juice show. So I'm pumped to get into it. Something that we wanted to touch on to kind of kick this episode off is, I think, a kind of a trend that I see a lot of online, especially in the music industry, in the music marketing space, is a lot of people, a lot of artists, musicians, they want a perfect blueprint. They want to know exactly what campaigns do I run, what's perfect for me, what's perfect for everybody. They kind of want this cookie cutter approach. And you see a lot of that, especially for people who are just kind of dipping their toes into trying to build a fan base online. We kind of talked about this on last week's episode when we were talking about, building a roadmap for yourself, that there isn't really a perfect campaign, a perfect solution for that applies to everybody. There's no one size fits all. But in this episode, I was pumped to kind of dive into 4 campaigns that we think are really important for almost any artist to have in their marketing stack at one point or another, especially once they kind of do an overview of what's happening in their fan base and in their growth as a music business. These are 4 campaigns that we think every artist really needs. So I wanted to preface with that like, this isn't a one size fits all sort of blueprint by any stretch,
Yeah, and I think this is great, and I'm so excited about this episode in particular because it is building off of last week's where we were talking about here's how you audit, here's how you figure out what you need to do. And so it's cool to be able to now just have this deep dive into, all right, here's your options, like here's how you do it. And like you said, building off last week, this is not a one size fits all. You might be at a certain point of your career where you only need, you have 3 of the 4 of the campaigns already running, but you need the one or you need all of them. So it's cool because it'll lay everything out, and then based off of where you are, you can take what you need and start building what you need to get your marketing infrastructure in place.
For sure, yeah, I couldn't agree more. And just to tap in for anybody who's listening for the first time, we'll link to last week's episode in the show notes so that if you are trying to figure out a roadmap for yourself now, you can listen back to last week and catch up if you're a little bit behind. But let's dig into it, man.
Let's go.
I'm super stoked. Let's you want to kick it off, Ed? What's kind of number 1 here for us?
Let's do it. Well, I think anybody that has listened or been involved in the Indiepreneur community has probably heard this, and if not, it's a great thing to hear. But the first campaign that all indies and all musicians in general need in place is a top of funnel campaign, which we refer to as a fan finder, which is a video view campaign that really generates awareness. So I feel like we're going to spend a decent amount of time here talking about the importance of this and why it is such a good distinctive campaign to have in place. But that's it. Write it down, circle it. Fan finder campaign is number 1.
Yeah, for sure. I think like having some kind of awareness generation that can happen for you on tap is really important. And, like Ed said, what we like to focus on when we're working with clients at IndieX and when we, and inside of the trainings inside IndiePro, a lot of what we talk about for awareness generation at the very beginning, connecting with new listeners for the very first time as we talk about running what we call a fan finder campaign, a video views campaign on Facebook and Instagram, typically a longer form video to get people to engage. And, there's plenty of different kinds of top of funnel awareness strategies that you could use. You see a lot of people who run swipe ups to DSPs, for example, to cold traffic, and they try to get as many people over to Spotify as they can. Just for example, we like as kind of a core sort of campaign piece, we like working with these longer form video views, objective campaigns to really try to drive in one, like discovery that feels like it's native and happening naturally, not being forced on you. There's not any, swipe up kind of language or click here. It's very one action focused, trying to get people to just watch. That's really the objective.
Yeah. And what's really cool, is that that's the objective, but there's no call to action on the actual post. So as a campaign that is really focused on just introducing yourself to new people, it's really, really effective. And I feel like one of the things I always hear, and that I also, previously used to think, is it's like, gosh, the music's great. We got great music. Like, how do you get it in front of people? Like, how do you find fans? And I feel like historically it was always like, oh, go out and play a bunch of shows. And when you're starting off, it's kind of like, all right, well, that's not that realistic, as the sole way to build my career. So what's cool about it is like, oh, here's this strategy you can learn and do from your home, with your band, film a really, really good video, and then you put it out and you can just run it for a long time. I mean, I'm still running video campaigns for assets that were filmed in 2017 that are still doing really well. So
yeah,
it gives you this lifeline of actionable ways to get in front of people without forcing your music down the throat. So it's not cringy in the sense of hey, please go listen to my song, right? It's here's my song. If you like it, great. If you don't, great. And you're really just banking that, you're banking on your music and on your performance that you have a good video, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, for sure. We go over in the Fan Finder method training, which is Inside IndiePro. If you guys want to check that out, if you're not familiar with it, we'll link to IndiePro in the show notes. But something that we talk about in the strategy of this specific kind of awareness building campaign at the introduction stage of the buddy system is creating video content that really works to, one, feel native to a platform. It doesn't need to be a super high quality narrative style music video. We've talked about this plenty on the podcast on previous episodes. But it's really meant to, these kinds of ads are really meant to create a moment, for a cultural kind of moment for the fans that are seeing it and the listeners that are going to deeply engage with it, and almost works to orchestrate a feeling that might come with seeing a viral video for the first time. Not that every fan finder goes bananas viral by any stretch. That's not really the goal, although we have seen that happen before. The goal really is to put a creative in front of somebody that they see it and they feel like they're discovering it for the first time, or they're discovering it on their own. And that can create a really cool sort of moment for a fan that I think is much more impactful than, I saw an Instagram story and heard a 15-second snippet of a song and swiped up to listen to it. So these kinds of campaigns really work well to create fans, take a very cold listener, and if they stick through watching, 75 to 100% of the video, you've got someone who showed a bit deeper commitment into something, especially if, we're looking at qualifiers like people who then engaged with the post in the comments, or, went and followed you on IG or jumped over to your Facebook page or something like that.
Yeah. And I feel like that cultural moment is such an important thing too, to underline, because when you have something that's just, when you put the perfect video in front of your ideal fan, it will connect. And I think one of the things I've heard over the years is skepticism around that idea. Oh, okay, well, is it really as easy as putting this video in front of the right person? And how do you do that? And, when I first started hearing that, I think back to when I discovered bands that I liked, and it was never through please go listen to our single, or, swipe up to stream, right? It was always through, like scrolling through my newsfeed and I saw a video, or I came across a random video on YouTube, or like this random song popped up and I really liked it. And I felt like I found this band. And then from there, I took myself deeper into their ecosystem. So that, and it's like, if you're doubting like, oh, is this going to be effective or not? It's like, that's the first core principle I think is worth considering, is that, like, think about when you found your favorite bands. You found them yourself, a friend told you about them. It was this indirect introduction, which is how we refer to it, where like it wasn't the artist putting their music in front of you necessarily. It was you finding them. And that's why the fan finder is so powerful, top of funnel, because you're doing the work of making the video and creating the audiences and building the ad campaigns, but you're not forcing it on people. You're allowing them to make a yes or no decision based off the video asset that they see, so that if they decide to go deeper, if they decide to watch, then it's like, that's their choice, right? Like, they're taking the step into your world, and that's why it's so powerful. Yeah,
it's consent right in the content.
Right.
That's super interesting.
Yeah.
That reminds me of something that Cirque and I talked about a couple episodes when he was on the show. I'll link to that too, because we talked a lot about like creating a culture with your fan base. And one of the things we talked about, and Ed, I know you know how I feel about this artist, but we talked about John Bellion, and John Bellion's music is some of my favorite music. He's one of my favorite artists. And I actually discovered him and his music, not through, like you said, not through like a push to listen to his music. I discovered him on YouTube, through one of his studio videos. So again, like, while this wasn't a fan finder style campaign that he was running, it was, recurring content on YouTube, and he was putting these studio video sort of songwriting production walkthroughs together. It was the content that like sucked me into being a fan of his. That was what I saw first before I listened to anything. So the same principle kind of applies.
And interestingly enough, with John Bellion, I had actually heard his recordings before I saw his videos, and I thought the recordings were okay. They were a little weird. He's got all that kind of funky stuff going on. I was like, that's not my cup of tea necessarily. And 6 months later, I'm on YouTube, and one of his videos, his acoustic performances, pops up, and I watch it, and it's just like, holy cow, that was incredible. So then you have this new.
Is that the stupid deep acoustic video?
It was actually that was one of them, and then the piano acoustic version of Human was the one that I saw.
Oh yeah, so good.
And so so these videos are so awesome too, because that's a great example of an artist who has a huge fan base that didn't resonate with me at first, and then I see this performance video, and now I love all the recordings, right? So it's like getting that raw display of ability on camera. That's what a fan finder is all about. And
dude,
it's just like laying it out there, saying like, here's what I'm good at. Not just here's what I'm good at. Here's what I am undeniably great at. Like, and I want you to see it, and I think you're gonna like it. And it's like, it's that John Bellion's a great example of a huge artist working for them. We have tons of grassroots artists that it works for. It doesn't really matter where you are in your career. It's like great content that resonates and puts your ability on display. That's so powerful for everybody.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Like, it's about really putting out there in a very specific kind of video. Like, it's really putting your talent like on display. I think like something that's interesting here is like creating a good fan finder, meaning like building a great video asset. It takes a lot of talent, it takes and skill and hard work. I mean, you guys like 502s, I think, are a great example of a band that puts together killer fan finders like all the time. I had the privilege of seeing the one that you have in the works, and as far as like a cultural moment goes, it's so on brand to who you guys are. The driveway video is the one I'm talking about, by the way. And I just think that like I'd love to know, like, for our listeners, like, if they're not familiar with the fan finder method and haven't gone through the training, like, what are the kind of thought processes that go through your head when you're building these sorts of storyboarding and doing shot lists for shooting these kinds of videos for yourself?
Yeah. I mean, there's three main things that you want to keep in mind when you're doing this. The first is that the intro to the video has to be great. Like, it's got to be a great intro, in the sense that you want to immediately put out there what you're trying to get in front of your viewer, right? So like for us, it's like, hey, good time strumming banjos, singing along. For some rappers that we've worked with, it's like, wow, this guy's a great rapper. Let's start right out with him rapping. Rock bands, you want to get your blaring guitars out or your great vocals, and it's like,
right, that pattern interrupt.
Right, exactly. So that's the first thing, is that like whenever you're planning a video, you want to have this great like pattern interrupt kind of shock and awe moment at the start, which just stops people when they're scrolling and gets them to watch the video. So that's super, super important. Number two that I always think about is like, you want the set to be cool. You want the video to look cool. So say someone's scrolling and you stop them. The next thing that's probably going to keep them there is if the video looks cool. And I know that's a really kind of objective statement, but if you go and find your favorite artist and you look at their YouTube and you watch like their videos, you can kind of see like, oh, this video looks well put together. It looks cool. It looks professional. And that doesn't mean it's shot with like, a 4K camera. It just means that it's thought out and you have a nice backdrop. So that's really, that's really important. And then third is the audio's got to be good. There's a couple options here. I prefer to do live audio. You can always do some kind of overdubbing. If you go that route, I would say, at least do live vocals, and make sure that your miming is on point, but go live when you can. But you want to make sure the audio is good, because if you put it all together and you think about it at a high level, what I just described is somebody sees your video, they stop to watch it, it looks cool, it sounds good, boom, there you go. This person's probably going to like that because you're showing it to fans of your genre that you're making this video for. So from a planning level, those are like the three main things I kind of keep in the back of my head. And then the last touch point is just like, I always want to walk away from a video saying this was cool and I'm proud of it. Like, if nobody liked it, I think it's cool. I think it looks great. I think it sounds great. And I feel like when you walk away feeling that strongly about your video, those are typically the ones that do the best, where you're just like, yeah, whatever. I don't care what people think. It just follows these principles and it looks good. And I would stand by it,
I really like that you save that bit for last, because I think that that's something that a lot of musicians struggle with, is like, we put together music videos that are, they fit some grand vision that we have, and it's easy to put that cart before the rest of the horse and be like, well, it's just cool for me and I dig it. I'm kind of playing devil's advocate here with your idea, but without like, some framework to keep you on rails, it's easy to approach every video you make with just like, well, I'm going to make what I want, and like, it doesn't need to necessarily serve a purpose. Like, this is very purpose driven in terms of what the video is going to work for in this kind of campaign. Right. But then you still want to walk away with feeling like, yes, I know this is going to be great for, really like deep introduction stage work. Yeah. And I also love it, Right. Yeah, exactly. You set the framework like that you're trying to hit, because the video has to have a purpose. It's not just making a video to put a video out. Like, you set the framework of what you want it to accomplish. And then once you're working in those bounds, it's like, all right, well, now I can just do whatever I think is going to fit and be artistic in the way that I want it to. So I think that's a good point it's a good point that you pointed out that I put that last, because I didn't even think about that. But it's like, that is important, that you want to set up the rules, and then you want to figure out and do what you want to do. Yeah, it's almost like how you set your ego aside a little bit when it comes to creating videos.
Yeah, and the other thing is like, I plan the videos out, never just if you're going to have a good video, never just show up and like do it day of. That's never worked well. For me personally, it's always like thought, planning, and then you show up the day of and everything's kind of in place and it looks good. So that's probably a last note.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That kind of preparation, I think, is really important. It just helps the process go smoothly.
I think one quick thing too here is like, the videos we're talking about, in most instances, they're shot with one camera and a couple microphones, or like a pretty simple audio setup. This is not a multicam, multi-day shoot that we're talking about. It's like 2 to 3 hours, a videographer, audio, band setup, So it's intended to be simple.
Yeah, for sure. It it's a very simple setup that can be very, very cost effective.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so that's number one, like something to get you new listeners on kind of on demand as you want them. And I think the fan finder campaigns are great for top of funnel on Facebook, on Instagram. They work really, really well. The next thing I wanted to kind of kick around was what you do with awareness that you have, and I think what's really important here when it comes to music marketing campaigns, and something that every artist should have kind of in their toolkit is some kind of recurring content. That could look like, a weekly series on YouTube. It could be a weekly Facebook Live series. Even as something as simple as just being active on your social media. Like that's the kind of the bare minimum here. Having that kind of content happening on a consistent and hopefully recurring basis is really powerful for sure. Like that's kind of a no-brainer and not really the point that I wanted to get into. But with that content, having a Facebook ad, an Instagram ad campaign, or really any kind of ad, you can do this kind of retargeting on Google too. But I would say, for our purposes here, like a green light warmth boosting campaign, something that you can do very, very on a tight budget. You could spend $1 a day just to extend the reach of the content that you're putting out there and your recurring content.
Yeah, the green light warmth campaign I feel like is so powerful because if you get a great fan finder in place and you're spending money there, this is the next step, like Jack said, and it's very easy to set up. It's very cheap and it's very easy to keep up to date. So like across the board, green light warmth is probably one of the more simple campaigns, I would say, but also one of the more effective campaigns. And the point really is just like, if you're doing this bare minimum of being active on your socials and posting on your socials, this makes sure that the post in your activity gets in front of everybody that is engaging with your stuff. I'm sure everybody listening is aware, my reach is suppressed or I'm not getting to as many people as I want, right? Like that's a common issue that everybody says and experiences. And yes, that happens. But this is a workaround around that. Because like, all right, I'm posting Tuesdays and Fridays on Instagram, right? It's going to go to my audience and a certain number of people are going to see it. I'm going to get, my 200 likes on the post. Spending $1 a day running this green light warmth campaign for, running in front of your existing audience, you'll get more likes, you'll get more comments, you'll get more engagement. And more importantly, like setting aside those kind of vanity metrics, people in your ecosystem will see this post and you'll stay top of mind. They'll be aware of what's going on. Because I think one of the worst possible things for any artist is like just slipping out of kind of top of mind, like people aren't paying attention to you. That could be really detrimental, especially early on, where like, you don't want to just disappear and come back because it's like you're trying to build relationships, not patches,
Yeah, we kind of touched on that last week too, like wondering like why do fans fall off sometimes? And I think this is kind of an area where it's really important, and this is where like organic social media work does work for you, and it does work to nurture your fans and keep them engaged and keep them in the loop with what you're doing. But if you're not reaching them for one, or also learning about what content they really dig and making sure that content gets in front of them, then like you're going to have people drop off. And I think this is where a lot of artists fall into a trap of just like, I just need fans. I just need people listening, but then nothing else is happening after that intro stage, So I think that's why this is so powerful, and you can do it for like, nothing, $1 a day, like $30 a month or something like that. The cost of a meal out. I think it's awesome. It's
like I said, it's easy, it's cheap, and it's super, super effective. So it's like those three things combined should just make people's ears perk up in the first place, because it's everything people want to hear, and it's a great, great tool.
Yeah, for sure. So this next step, I think we've talked about building up the permission stage of the buddy system plenty on this podcast. So the next kind of marketing campaign that we're going to talk about probably isn't going to come as a surprise to anybody listening that is, who has hung around creative juice world and is in Indiepreneurs world. But we're going to talk about it anyway, because I think we've got some interesting insights from IndieX that we'd like to share with you guys today. And, this is an opt-in campaign, something to get your fans to sign up for your list, whether that's your email list or your text list, whatever it might be.
Yeah. And I would say, like, if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, well, I've heard fan finders, I've heard Greenlight Warmth, I've heard opt-in before. It's like, this is a really good opportunity, if you are familiar with this stuff, to listen and make sure that you have in place what we're talking about, and that you're kind of hitting the key characteristics of these campaigns to make sure that you're running things efficiently. So don't just gloss over it if you're like, oh, I've got a fan finder going, right? It's like, make sure you're running it well. But the permission offer, the opt-in campaign is like, I say everything's important, right? Because it is. But but it's like, it's logical steps, It's like, okay, you get fans, you give some more content in front of them with Greenlight Warmth. Like, the next step is you want to be able to talk to people. What are you going to spend money for on the first two campaigns we just talked about if the end goal is to just let people disappear and you never hear from them again? Like, that's not why.
Yeah, or having to rely on continuing to spend money to reach them.
Right. It's like, that's not what you're doing your own marketing for, It's like, all right, you want to collect their emails or their phone numbers, some kind of list where you're getting their contact information so that you control when you can hit them up. All right, I got this new song, here's an email. That's way more effective than running a post for $100. So, that in itself is an overview of why this is important. But where it gets really interesting is diving into the different kinds of ways that you can collect emails and that kind of stuff. So I know, Jack, what are a couple good examples you have of ideal opt-in campaigns?
I love this question, because like bribes that artists can use are so much more than just like sign up for a free download. I hate to sound like a broken record about that, but like there's so much more than like sign up for a free download or sign up to my newsletter for updates,
Yeah.
There's so much more than that. And we go into that. We've gone into that in the podcast. I'll link to an episode specifically on bribes. And again, like if you want kind of a step-by-step kind of walkthrough hand holding of how to craft a bribe, if you're just like, I don't even know where to start. Like we've got that in IndiePro if you want to check it out with our Grow Your Permission List training. But a couple in there that we talk about, simple can work really well and complex can work really well. You can get super creative as long as you like build content that then works with the offer, the free offer that you're putting together. So, simple things like offering fans early access to your releases, maybe 24 hours before a song drops, it goes to an exclusive segment of your list that is signed up for that kind of bribe. And it wouldn't just be that, it would be as soon as they sign up, you hit them with secret content that they weren't expecting to get. So then you're over delivering on your promise right away. And then, maybe next week that single is going to drop and they get it on Thursday instead of Friday. That's kind of like an easy sort of opportunity, just one example of like a bribe that can work really well, especially if you have a rabid fan base that is just like stoked on what you're doing. And if you're putting content out or music out on a consistent basis. So that's one example. A more complex example is building an experiential kind of opt-in campaign where it's built around, say, an album launch or an EP launch, and you're giving people, the behind the scenes of the recording process or something like that. We've certainly gone over this. Like I said, like a year ago, the last time that you were on the podcast before coming on as a co-host, we had you and Jesse on to talk about your album launches, and that was a big part of it. So these are kind of like two polar ideas, but you can get super, super creative, anything from early access to exclusive content that maybe you've just been holding back and you're using that to get people on your list, to album launch type bribes. There's just a lot that you can do.
Yeah, and like to build off that, the simple and the complex, like Jack just said, one thing that I think can be a little bit frustrating in a sense with opt-in offers is that this is where it kind of gets a little more freeform, in the sense that if you really follow the principles of a fan finder and you go and dive into the trainings and you're setting up the audiences, like, and you're having the pattern interrupt and you're making this ideal asset, that's going to probably go really well for you. And that's kind of like, it happens more times than not, right? Like, not going to say guarantee, but it's pretty close. Same thing with Greenlight Warmth. Right. That's literally just setting up what a campaign to retarget what's already working and getting it in front of people. Opt-in campaigns, like Jack just said, there's so many different options and there's so many different like ways to customize it that it really is up to the artist to say, okay, here's the framework, right? Whether it's an early access, like kind of simple opt-in, like Jack was just saying, where you give early access, or it's a more complex album launch thing where you're running a multi-day experience. There's options, but what I've always found makes opt-in offers really effective is, one, testing it until you find something that works for your audience, that resonates with your audience. So that's the message of like what your opt-in offer is, the value of what you're providing. Like, you're probably going to have to go through a testing phase here to figure out what works. This isn't like a do this, you have emails type thing. So I think that's really, really important. And the second thing I think is important to stress in opt-ins is, this is probably the place where you have to be more engaged than anywhere else in the buddy system. Because at this point, you're asking people to come onto your email list. And even if you do get them on there, that's when the conversation starts. So when you open this kind of door in the buddy system, it's like, all right, you're now forming relationships with every single person that comes in. And it's your obligation, because you're going down this path, to talk to people, to answer their comments, to answer all the emails that you get, to make sure that you're sending out emails. Like, that's something that gets overlooked that I think is really, really important and ties into opt-in offers being effective. Yeah,
100%. I totally agree. Like, because then what are you spending your money for, just to build a cold list? I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, you have to be engaged in the process, for one, and being willing to test and iterate and find what really works for your fans in terms of the messaging, like you said, and the value of what you're giving as kind of your bribe. But then also after the fact, you have to be engaged and make sure that these people are, one, receiving and kind of over delivering on what you promised, like I said, but also continuing to hear from you, which I think is a really important piece, especially, when you want to take those people and kind of get them into deeper stages of relationship with you in terms of things like sales. I just think that matters so much. I wanted to give a little piece of insight here, something that we've been seeing a lot at the agency in the last year or so, that we've been doing a lot of with a lot of our clients at IndieX, has been, traditionally in a lot of types of, in a lot of opt-in, permission stage campaigns, a structure that you often see used, and we've used this, in plenty of campaigns, plenty of album launches, is someone signs up for a free offer in their email. They're then nurtured with content over the course of, a handful of days. They get the value that you promised to them, and then they're made a sales offer on the back end. Some opt-in campaigns have that sales offer piece to help you then monetize, get those fans into what we call the affirmation stage of the buddy system, get them becoming a first-time customer. And that can work really, really well. Not every permission campaign needs to have that. Not every opt-in campaign needs to have that, but that can be really cool. But something interesting that we've been doing a lot of at IndieX recently has been not only having the sales offer at the end of this, but also immediately after someone is opting in, and signing up for your email list or your text list, on that confirmation page, the page that says, thank you for signing up, there's a sales offer right there for a tripwire, really low cost sort of product that's kind of lobbed out to them to be like, hey, if you want this, it's related to what you just signed up for, you can have it. You can pick it up here for a discount or for free and just cover shipping. We've been doing a lot of that, and it's really, really helpful for subsidizing the cost of those leads. And we've been seeing a lot of that using that structure, which is a little bit different.
Yeah. And something that ties directly into that is you just use the phrase over deliver. I think that's super, super important to make sure that you're over delivering value to people, especially as they come on. And this immediate post opt-in offer is a great example of over delivering, because the messaging that we've been using around that, so like you sign up and then instead of a thank you page, you get this page that's like, hey, you get this thing. It's been very much like, hey, congrats. At least the stuff I've seen work has been like, hey, congrats. You've unlocked this cool thing and it's free.
Yeah.
So now somebody goes from signing up for your opt-in offer, which they thought was like, oh, I'm getting, 5 free songs, to immediately being greeted by like, oh, and I get this free physical package if I cover the shipping with all this cool stuff. It's limited edition and I've unlocked it somehow. Like, that is a framing that works well, but it's also over delivering because you're immediately stacking on more value. And then in the process, like the tripwire, you're creating a customer too, which is great. So it's like always over deliver, I think, is a lesson that I figured out early on, is like, whatever you say, do more.
Dude, I love the you've unlocked this language, because it immediately, like, someone already feels like, I think about like when I sign up for email lists through bribes, because I'm on so many freaking email lists. I'll never get to inbox 0. But I sign up for so much of that stuff, and I'm not gonna lie, like, I take tripwire offers often for all sorts of things. I think it's just, I think it's exciting when you sign up for something that you think is cool, and then you're made an offer for something that is even, slightly even cooler, and it's presented to you as like, okay, you've unlocked this as like an add-on because you signed up for XYZ. That's just dope. Yeah. I love that.
That's an important thing that you just said, is that like, if somebody it's easy, I think, to get sidetracked and think like, oh, well, is anybody going to want this offer after they sign up? But the way you just described it, it's like, you go through something. If you're joining, you're already excited to be joining this experience or email list. Like, you're excited about it. So if you're immediately hit with something else that mimics your excitement and makes you an offer, you're really likely to take it, because it's like, if you put yourself in that consumer's shoes, it's like, oh my gosh, I get this cool thing from this band that I like and I just found, like, I'm in. And then it's like, oh, I'm getting more. So it's like,
right.
Believing, I think that's a self-belief thing, right? Where it's like, indies, when they start off, I know I definitely did not necessarily, I was like, who the heck wants who wants my CD? Why would anybody care about that? And I think as much as you can fight that internal doubt and be like, no, people do want this, like, they're going to want this, and view it that way and meet their excitement with your own excitement. I think that was a really good point that you made.
No, I mean, I totally hear you about like the limiting beliefs that come with this. I think on that, like, this kind of goes back to what we were saying about like making sure that you've tested and validated and come up with a cool bribe offer. Because if your bribe, your free offer to get people on your list and opting in is really cool, then yeah, people are going to be excited about that. And it does grease the wheels if you decide, hey, I'm going to put, a very, very low cost sort of sales offer on the back end and see who wants to raise their hand. You're going to get those rabid people that are just excited and want to, take the next step right away. But it does come down to like making sure that first touch, that first offer, that first ask is something that people will really desire. Because if it's kind of lackluster and mediocre, like, you might get people who are like, oh yeah, I'll sign up for the email list, like, whatever.
Yeah.
But, getting the next step out past that is going to be that much harder because they're not really that excited about it,
Yeah, exactly. Look, you want to just start, when you start with the fan finder and then you move into the Greenlight Warmth, and then you move into the opt-in campaign, you want to start at the start with the best foot forward. So over deliver on the fan finder as much as you can, then over deliver on the Greenlight Warmth posting, make sure you're doing a bang up job there, and then crush the opt-in. And like Jack said, it greases the wheels for every step, greases the wheels for the next step. And the fourth campaign is really kind of the make or break, like, the next step in the relationship, which is where you start making actual sales offers. And that's where you want to, if you've done a really good job with those first 3 steps or through those first 3 campaigns, you'll have an easier time heading into a sales offer for somebody.
Totally. Yeah, that's great. I mean, a perfect kind of way to kick off talking about this last campaign. What's interesting about this is, like, we've been using the word campaign pretty loosely here, and we've been talking a lot about ads. So going into this fourth sort of marketing campaign that we're talking about, we're not actually really talking about ads here.
Yeah.
This can include ads, but these are just marketing campaigns in general, and a campaign can have any traffic source that you want it to. It could be just organic social media. It could be advertising, paid traffic. It could just be email. And a lot of times sales promotional campaigns that you do on a recurring and frequent basis, they oftentimes live in email.
Yeah.
Sometimes in text too. So that's what we're talking about here is, it's not just about running ads. These are often email based. A lot of the sales campaigns that we run, the sales marketing campaigns that we run are email marketing, and helping artists to come up with an offers regularly throughout the calendar year, to get people who are on the list and shake them up from being just a subscriber to being a customer. But even more important, in my opinion, is taking people who are existing customers and continuing to put offers in front of them that are cool, that continue to get them to buy again, repeat customers, kind of that ascension stage of the buddy system. And that's really important for building your music business in terms of driving up customer lifetime value, the amount that someone is spending with you over the time that they're a fan.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think you can stress enough that as soon as you hit the point where you have an email list, that's kind of where the fun begins, because you start to know people, you start to be able to craft offers that you're excited about, that people are going to be excited about. And like you said, you can make offers continuously throughout the year, like making offer calendars and doing seasonal offers, and not just here's a 20% store discount, right? It's Christmas time. Here is a t-shirt with all of cartoons of everybody in the band in a Santa hat. I don't know, whatever. But you can make these kind of funny on-brand offers, and you can do high ticket, low ticket. You can start to play around with it. But I think that that's so important. And I also think that a hurdle to just clear immediately before we start really diving into this a little bit is at this point, if you have people on your email list, you should have relationships with them. You should be talking to them. You should know them. You probably know, a good amount of people's names on your list when emails come in from them. So never feel if I make too many sales offers, I'm going to be it's not authentic. I'm bleeding my list dry, right? That's never been a problem that I've run into for myself or for any clients who actually have a connection with their audience. So just before we dive into it, if you're authentic, if you're talking to people, you should be wanting to make sales offers, because what you're doing is you're doing something that you think's cool and allowing people to be a part of it, which is why they joined this whole community in the first place. Spot on.
Yeah, that's so true. I think it's falling in the cracks of being mediocre is really, that sounds a little harsh probably, but I think that's where a lot of artists get worried when it comes to making sales offers is you're kind of doing email marketing mediocre. You're kind of, not really nurturing your fans a whole lot. So then, you would be afraid to make consistent, regular sales offers and run these kind of campaigns, because it would feel like it's just bleeding your list dry. But if you're doing, your marketing well, and you're really working that nurturing stage of the buddy system, kind of the glue that holds everything together, this is, something that really works to kind of build the monetization chain of your music business, of your career as an artist. And it's super, it's straight e-commerce, and I think that's something that a lot of artists aren't necessarily comfortable with. It's hard and it's different, and it's not an easy sort of hurdle to get over. There's a lot of limiting beliefs, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something you grow into, all these 4 campaigns that we've talked about. This isn't something that if you're just starting out, you're going to go out tomorrow and set them all up. These build on each other. You learn from your mistakes on them as you set them up. But being authentic, making those relationships is so important. And just as a clarifying point, making consistent sales offers does not mean that you're making a sales offer every 2 weeks or 3 weeks or even 4 weeks. There doesn't have to be such a strict cadence to it. It just means that you come up with a really great idea, you make the offer, you turn around, you do it again. Probably if you're just starting out, try to make 4 sales offers over the course of the year. That's one every
Right.
what, 3 months. So
Yeah, like once a quarter.
right, and it's like just make sure they're really, really cool and people really, really are excited about them, and that you're excited about them, and then it's authentic, and you'll grow over time to make more offers. But it's like you want to be aware of that.
Yeah, these kinds of campaigns, like I think it's helpful to point out here, like you can get started really creatively on this front. And really just like look at the calendar year and be like, what can I bake into this that is related to me as an artist? Because maybe you don't feel comfortable selling it all the holidays or something like that. Like I will say this, like you should absolutely have a sales promotion, a sales marketing campaign going at Black Friday. Like I will stress that till the day I die. But, maybe you're not comfortable doing like a Valentine's Day sale, but you could do like a birthday bash or, for your birthday or for one of your band members' birthdays, or you could do like an anniversary of, when your first record released or something like that. You can kind of bake these into a sales promotional calendar and then build, time limited or scarce based on what the offer is, promotions that go over, a week or 10 days or something like that. You could run a flash sale that runs for 3 days or just over a weekend, even one day. But the creativity here is kind of, the creative potential is kind of endless. Just sort of depends on your imagination and how you're willing to think outside of the box on the products you want to offer. You can introduce, new merch this way. It's a really good way to put, new designs out there, or if you've got a new merch collection or something like this. These kind of marketing campaigns work really well to put the right offers in front of the right subsets of your fans at the right time. You're not going to run, a super high ticket offer to people who just bought from you yesterday for the first time. But this is really where you can kind of flex your creative muscles on these kinds of campaigns and work to build up that, that customer LTV, how much a fan spends with you over the time that they are a fan.
Yeah, it's really cool. Like I have a really fun time doing this for myself and for different IndieX clients, coming up with creative offers, because it's like that is part of the creative process to me. It's, you get the songs, you get the videos, you put them out, but then like coming up with a cool offer is really sick. We were putting out like neon orange vinyl. That's not something I ever thought that we would do, but it's like, oh, we had this crazy idea and we were able to print it, and it's like, okay, cool. So it's like Jack said, you can look at the calendar and figure out like a holiday and say, okay, Black Friday's coming up, which you should do, but Valentine's Day, it's like, all right, I don't want a promo for that. Or the other way to approach it is just come up with an idea, and then you can retroactively find a time period to make that offer, if that makes sense. So it's like, if you're thinking, oh, I have people that have spent, $200 lifetime with me, I want to sell 5 pairs of custom Converse shoes, then just come up with the idea and then figure out where it fits in your calendar. Because like Jack kind of just touched on, is like, okay, a sales promo is 10 days to 3 weeks typically, is how long I would say to run it. 3 weeks being the kind of upper end, unless you're doing a long pre-sale. So the most important thing is having a great offer idea. And like Jack said, then you can get it in front of your fans and let it go from there.
Yeah, that's so true. I think like that's a really good way to think about approaching this process, is like you can either get creative on the front end and just look at your calendar creatively, or you can go, reverse engineer, like you said, and just start cooking up cool offer ideas, and then the sky's the limit. You just need to figure out where you want to slate it and who you want to present that to. So yeah, that's number 4. I think that this one is, really fun and creative. And as you build up your fan base, and more people are getting to know you, these are kind of easier and easier to tap into as you grow. So it's, not necessarily the number 4 for every artist that needs to start right now, but it's certainly the number 4 for every artist at some point within their career. You need to have these in place. They're really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like all 4 of the campaigns are really fun to set up if you're invested in the process and you're excited about it. So it's not like you have to jump to making offers, and you shouldn't jump to making offers. but it's like when you're at a place to make offers, then you'll be super excited about it. And it's really fun to just kind of put your creativity into all these different campaigns.
100%. Yeah. Well, I hope you guys dug this little rundown of these campaigns and some of the insights that we've been seeing really working best right now in, middle of 2021, because, this stuff is always changing and we're kind of always keeping a pulse on, where to go and how to tweak to make these kinds of campaigns better and better. So if you don't have something in this list in place and you think that it would be, powerful for you to get, I encourage you to jump on it. We're going to be sharing some more experimental stuff that we've been working on next week, and I'm really excited for that episode. But until then, we'll catch you next time. Thanks for hanging out, Ed.
See you guys.
Peace out, Indies.
East Coast, West Coast.